Greetings. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the gutter. Everyone ends up here eventually. It's only a matter of time. My name is Aldous, and I will be your host this evening. Each episode of the gutter it stands alone in its topic of choice. From the life stories of great comic creators, be they artists or writers, soliloquies on comic topics ranging from the obscura to the traditional, or those random strokes of fate that bury themselves deep into the conscious mind, forming a seed from which creation sprouts eternal in the mind of indie creators. Presented for your enjoyment is an episode dedicated much deeply to the latter, in perhaps one of the finer forms it could be founded upon. Each of the fine gentlemen that will be joining us this evening and have their voice projected out into the ether of space via compressed ones and zeros, were in some way inspired or moved by the artwork of one man. And it really doesn't grant the topic the depth that it really richly deserves. And we probably could have gone about this in a much more fancy way, but it's us and it's the gutter, so this is what we get. So tonight on the gutter, we will be looking at the enigmatic art of one Wallace Allen Wood. And I'm sure each of our guests this evening have brought copious notes and stories that they will share for their individual journeys about how they discovered Mr. Wood's art and what it's meant to them, for how they've elected to talk about this fine gentleman this evening. But first, if I may, let us go to the life's blood, the chat. We see we have Mad Ruth both in the chat and on the panel. Snuggy Jr., my Saturday brother, great to see you, sir. Jason Sandberg, also on the panel and in the chat. KSSS, it's his birthday. Congratulations, sir. Another trip around the sun, just like every other day of the year. And then we've got Kris Faction on the panel and in the chat as well. And that will do it, because we're the gutter. And if we get more than 5 viewers, I don't know what to do with myself. So, that being said, Los Angeles County retains 7 pages eternally on file for your perusal regarding Wally Wood. These are, in my opinion, the 7 saddest pages of comics. For when it comes to comic books in general, there are 3 men that stand alone and apart from all others, as has been discussed on this show repeatedly, as I've mentioned on more than one appearance across shows in the sphere. I firmly subscribe to the Mr. Jim Steranko theory that the trinity of American comics are none other than Joe Kubert, Jack the King Kirby, and of course the topic of our show tonight, Wallace Wood. So to return, in a way, to those 7 pages, they are maintained by the Department of the Los Angeles County Coroner. And due to events that befell Mr. Wood on Halloween evening in 1981, following a series of tragic kidney failure episodes and a stroke in 1978 that left him with the use of only one eye, that evening Mr. Wood placed the barrel of a .44 caliber Charter Arms Bulldog to his temple and pulled the trigger. And those 7 pages outline the coroner's report for a single gunshot wound to the head and what was labeled a suicide. And this occurred in a swarthy, cheap, there really are not enough adjectives to describe this building. It was at this address that it occurred, 15150 Parethia Street in what is now Panorama City section of Los Angeles, is where Mr. Wood passed. And a life was over, but an era was over beyond even that. The first of the greats were gone, and he would have eventually be followed by both Mr. Kubert and Jack Kirby. But tonight, we will be celebrating everything that occurred before that fateful moment. We, in this case, means a rather large panel for this show, something that I usually intentionally try to avoid. But tonight's something a little special. For the people that are joining me tonight are the hosts, with the exception of one, of the upcoming Friday night's show, coming to a Friday evening near you. They are in no particular order. Jason Sandberg, returning guest and longtime fan of the show. Mad Ruth, returning guest and longtime fan of the show. And, of course, Kris Faction, who is currently covered up by his own text. How you doing, Kris? Good to see you. Welcome to the Gutter.
I'm glad to be here. First time guest. Party on.
Awesome. And then joining us as well in the Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson, Raiden Radio, who will be joining us for a while. We'll see how this goes. But I'm really excited to have the premier YouTube and Twitter ice cream reviewer aficionado now in my presence. I feel this is going to add something pretty sweet to the show. So,
hey, Raiden, what's the scoop?
Dude, you did that in the pre-show and it didn't land.
This is what you have to look forward to.
Yeah.
So,
Citizen Roden, thank you for joining us, Citizen Roden. It's a pleasure to see you. Jay Krager as well. Good to see Jay Krager. Dean! Oh, man. Dean is one of my favorite people, both because he's an amazing artist and also he is the vice president of the Michael Oden fan club. But that's not the full title. The full title is Michael Oden, fan of the Bob Kane, the Human Xerox Machine fan club. And that's why I love Dean, because he helps me with all the administration work on that, and I really, really do appreciate it. A couple of quotes, if I may, throw out here, and just to kind of set the table for what we're going to be talking about this evening. Show favorite actually spoke about his work quite a bit with Dean when Dean hosted. Howard Chaykin is quoted as saying regarding Wally Wood, he was just an engine of rage. I really can't put it any more specifically than that. Larry Hama, who we're going to get into his connection for one of the things that he made really Wally Wood famous for, said, everyone who actually met him liked him. Now, the implication there is that if you didn't meet him, you just knew about his behavior and you heard the stories. And while we're not going to get into much of a biography tonight, there are a number of people still today in comics that do not like Wally Wood because of everything that he had to say. He was very outspoken in most regards. So, joining us as well, B.A. Turner. Great to see you, sir. No excuses are needed for being late. Those will be handled in the after show. Denny O'Neil, one of my personal favorite, pretty much the Batman editor, also an amazing writer. I will always hold a grudge, but never hold it against him on how much he destroyed Steve Ditko's The Question with his DC run. He is quoted as saying, you can't talk about Woody without talking about drinking. And to that I have to say cheers. But, above all, and I think we can talk a lot about Wally's work, but I don't think there's any place to start other than, Marvel. At the time, Wally was already famous. He had worked for EC Comics. He was working on Mad with over a $200 page rate, which, again, this is the late 1960s. That's astronomical by today's standards. And then he took a massive pay cut to jump over to Marvel. Stan finally convinced him. And he came over, and on Daredevil issue 10, he did the unthinkable. He made Daredevil's suit red. And with that, Jim Steranko is quoted as saying, Wood transfigured Daredevil from a mundane hero into a major contender. Wood put the devil into Daredevil by replacing the original saffron yellow costume with one of satanic scarlet. He changed the character from a sideshow acrobat into a creature of the night. And I don't think anybody else ever had that same effect until Frank Miller took his turn at raising a pen and doing something on the page with regards to our favorite blind lawyer, Matt Murdock. But gentlemen, when it comes to your own takes, what was it about Wally? Before we even get into the art, what is it about Wally's work that resonates with you? And I will start with Jason, and then we'll move around the screen here.
Yeah, so I want to start by saying that for all those mainstream comic book artists who several weeks ago were using the hashtag comics broke me, they really should study the life and work of Wally Wood before they go and say something like that, because it's not the same. So I heard about Wally Wood. So in the letters pages and in the industry literature back in the early '80s, I would hear about this Wally Wood guy, right? And so I heard about him before I saw his work, and then I came across some EC reprints. And again, in the EC era, he's working alongside Al Williamson and Joe Orlando. So already there, he's in a very competitive league of artists, and his work just popped, and the intricacy of the backgrounds and the tech and so forth. But when you mentioned Daredevil, I think he was critical to Daredevil because he was able to portray the acrobatics of Daredevil better than the previous artists. And so I think he's, besides changing the costume, I think he really portrayed that he was able to portray that acrobatic aspect of Daredevil. Now, in the ensuing years, I did seek out Wally Wood artwork wherever I could find it. But what I think is most poignant for me is that in your mind, take yourself back to February, March of 2020, when COVID was happening. As there was that, everybody had that moment where they're like, "Is this really like? Is this it? Right? Could this? What's going to be my own personal vulnerability to this? What could happen? Like, holy cow, I could catch something and die." And for me, and this is the gutter. When facing the potential my potential demise at the hands of some virus that was ravaging the world, one of the things I did was I said, I am not going to die until I've read Wally Wood's Thunder Agents. So
Thunder Agents, really?
Yeah.
Of all things, that was the one.
Because I had been able to come across his other work, right? The EC stuff and the Daredevil stuff. I had that. But I'm like, I never got around to reading Thunder Agents. So my COVID moment of reckoning was that I'm not going to shake off this mortal coil until I get my hands on Wally Wood's Thunder Agents. So that's kind of my experience with Wally Wood. I do live in Minnesota, so I've never done a tour to see where he had lived and things like that. But he does have roots in Minnesota, so I've got a connection to him there. But yeah, definitely he was. I agree with Mr. Steranko that he was a giant. So that's my Wally Wood first impressions.
Gotcha. Yeah, he was born in Magaha, Minnesota, and lived there for the early portion of his life. But moving on, Mad Ruth, any thoughts on Wally Wood?
For sure. So, I mean, I'm not going to try to BS the panel. I've said previously I'm not overly familiar with a lot of the greats.
No. What I expect your question to be related to why the hell and Wally had some money, but why was all he could get was a Charter Arms Bulldog?
Yeah. To be honest, that wasn't my question, but
oh, okay. I thought for sure that would be as a weapons guy. I thought you'd be like, why that? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But go ahead. Sorry.
So first off, his service. I mean, he started off in the Merchant Marine during World War II. I found that fascinating. He entered the U.S. Army same time as my grandfather in '46, and he served his 4 years. Spent time in Japan. So yes, as a military guy, I always look at the service records, and then just the fact that over 40 years, looking at his detailed line art, like it looks like he didn't spend a day without drawing. I mean, I was absolutely blown away by the detailed line art and everything he does. How extensive his resume of books and comics are, and then realizing the fact that, like you said, he died he lived very poor in cockroach-ridden offices and rundown places, and it just, mind blowing.
Well, I mean, it always goes back to that famous picture, and you'll see both the Kirby estate and Jillian Kirby sharing it out at least twice a year, usually on Jack's birthday and then on the anniversary of Jack's death, of Jack's writing desk. And it's completely utilitarian. There's no flair. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just a wooden desk with a wooden chair, and there's ink stains everywhere. And nothing defines these gentlemen of this era more than that, because it's not about the frills. They don't have a fancy desk with huge, lights and everything. It's just, they just had a flat surface and they're slinging ink, man. And, there's a lot of quotes for, Wally about if you draw it and copy it and do it. I'm not even gonna. It's the point of that has been so misconstrued. I'm not even gonna recite it. But the end goal was these guys were looking to churn out ink and get pages done. That was the primary focus of what their entire ethos was. It was to push them out and get done. And for a passion of comics, they truly loved this, because any one of these gentlemen that we've talked about from this era, but Wood in particular, like I said, he was making $200 a page for Mad. He could just go over to Mad and just sit at Mad, but it wasn't enough. He wanted to do more. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, Kris, what are some of your takeaways just on the 10,000 foot level for Wally?
Well, like Mad Ruth, being a veteran, that's one of the first things I go to is his service. And you kind of look at that era, where so many great storytellers and artists came out of, and you kind of realize, like, a lot of these guys, they came from war, and yes, they died paupers, but only in their bank accounts, because he was the kind of guy that he saw some of the worst of what mankind had to offer. And then in turn, he gives us these amazing fantasy and sci-fi worlds, this funny Mad magazine, character and everything. And I think a lot of those guys, to them, yes, obviously he's getting this amazing page rate early on, but gives that up because they wanted to inspire people through art and through storytelling. And I think that he just falls in that category of, guys that, like I said, they saw the worst of that mankind had to offer, and they came home and they said, I don't really care if I'm rich or poor. I'm going to make the world a better place by creating something. And he did. I mean, you look at some of his artwork, it's the stuff that kids dream of,
For sure, man. No, he definitely has that resonance factor. And speaking of resonance factor, Corey Barton is in the chat. Greetings, Corey. Great to see you, sir. And then we've got a bunch of people greeting Corey. Snuggy says, hey, Corey. Dean says, Wallywood is better than Barry Allen. Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you, Dean. But yes, so moving on up to, we're going to skip over Raiden for a quick moment and go right to B.A. Turner. B.A. Turner, thank you for joining us. Hope Vigilance Creed is doing awesome. That's your current book that's out. But what's your takeaways from the overarching Wally Wood? How did he inspire you? Do you find his art moving? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, I have a small connection as well, similar to Jason. I spent a couple of years living in Minnesota, which was a good experience. But I think, for him, his art is just so unique and pulpy that it really pulls you in. Similar to like Frank Frazetta and other similar creators. The characters that he does, especially some of the eerie ones, it really draws you in. And I love a unique artist. And going back to what you said about how he could have just lived it up in the Mad pay rate, but he followed his passion, and I think us indies can relate to that more than anything, right? Is pushing away from kind of maybe the mainstream or what could make you the most money, but sticking to your passion and your passion projects. And I think it also gives you some perspective of how lucky a lot of the artists of today or the last couple decades had it, right, with their page rates, and how they could just kind of live it up, and they didn't have to be particularly unique, right? They just had to draw something. Whereas he had a unique style of art, and he went with his passion projects, not strictly for money. So I think he led, with a really good example for all of us.
Gotcha. And Raiden, closing it out, do you have any thoughts on Wally Wood overarching before we get into some of the art?
Okay, so like others, not wanting to be the kid that comes to class and has to pretend that he read the book, Aldous, I've talked to you about this before about how I'm mostly what I read growing up was 90s. So my experiences with anything before that, anything classic, came out of academia. So the one thing I want to, the bad news, I got to give you the bad news, is that I studied the entire canon of comic history in college, and Wally Wood's name did not come up once. Not a page.
Yeah, that does not surprise, shock, or otherwise move me that academia would completely avoid mentioning anything that Wood added into the equation.
But I envy you though, because you get to now encounter this stuff and read it for the first time. So to some extent, it breaks my heart to hear what you just said, but I envy you. Just like those people you encounter that haven't seen a classic movie like The Godfather, it's like, or they haven't seen, anyways, you're in for a treat.
Well, Aldous has been helping me, with the recommendations, and I'm slowly getting caught up on his list, but I'll get there eventually. The other thing I wanted to kind of add is, I did my research and I was, trying to imagine like the idea of having perpetual migraines seems awful to me. But what seems even worse than that, like I can't imagine managing that kind of pain, but I also can't imagine anything more taxing on that condition than just staring at a piece of paper with a pen and just drawing seems like the worst medicine for a migraine, at least in my imaginings.
And greetings to Felix Haas. Yeah, no, it's amazing, a lot of this stuff. Before we get into some of the art that was sent to me that we were going to review, there's one thing that I have to share, because going back to when Raiden Radio was on the first time on the show, we had a wonderful conversation about how Stan Lee was the master of redundancy. And as I am apt to do, and as I am never one to miss taking a shot at Stan for being a giant piece of shit, I did want to share this wonderful story regarding Daredevil number 10. And this is recited and quoted from The Life and Legend of Wallace Wood, Volume 1, edited by Bob Stewart and J. Michael Catrone. And so Wood is speaking with interviewer Mark Evanier. And Wood's quoted as saying, "I enjoyed working with Stan Lee on Daredevil, but for one thing, I had to make up the whole story. He was being paid for writing, and I was being paid for drawing, but he didn't have any ideas. I'd go in for plotting a session, and we'd just stare at each other until I came up with a storyline. I felt like I was writing the book, but not being paid for writing." And Evanier is quoted as saying, "Well, you did write one issue." And Wood responds, "One, yes, Daredevil number 10. I persuaded him to let me write one by myself, since I was doing 99% of the writing already. I wrote it, handed it in, and he said it was hopeless. He said he'd have to rewrite it all and write the next issue himself. Well, I said I couldn't contribute to the storyline unless I got paid something for the writing, and Stan said he'd look into it. But after that, he only had inking for me. Bob Powell was suddenly penciling Daredevil. Once Wood saw Daredevil 10, this is his quote, "I saw Daredevil 10 when it came out, and Stan had changed 5 words. Less than an editor usually changes. That was the last straw." So that's a wonderful story about why you hear about Stan Lee and why you don't hear about Wally Wood when you go to an academic course on comics. But moving into probably the one thing that Wally is most renowned for, at least within the social media scene, because it's much easier to share a picture and just go, wow, than it is to actually talk about it, is this, which is 150,000% responsible to Larry Hama, who, when he was in the bullpen at Marvel, photocopied this and distributed it, and from there then after it became renowned. It's also completely fucking wrong. There aren't 22 panels, there's 24 panels. He missed 2 when he Xeroxed them and just re-lettered it so that it would only be 22 panels. And if you don't believe me, you can go out and purchase, which you already should own, the Wally Wood sketchbook. And in there are the actual 24, not 22 panels that always work. This is really simple. This is the kind of stuff that you see repeatedly. And I'm going to leave this up for a while. And I think KSS mentioned like Sally Forth, and there's Cannon, and there's all the stuff he did with Kirby where he was inking Kirby, and there's Thunder Agents. And just in all of Wally's stuff, you're going to see these panels repeated all the time. And after this era, after the late 60s to early 70s, you see a lot of other guys start to use these, to the point that now these are pretty much ubiquitous. It's pretty rare you don't see somebody doing a riff on one of these panels at any time. They have become that much of a standard baseline for comic creation. And that's honestly, that's probably Wood's greatest legacy, is because Hama threw them on a Xerox machine and copied them. So we get two things. We get this wonderful sharing, because Wood never certainly did it in any kind of a way to teach. Everything was about making the page faster. So moving on, we've got B.A. Turner. Let's go back to you. You kicked over some great ones to me that I got here. So Weird Science. I mean, number one, great choice. But I think the most evocative thing for me is one thing. I want to hear, what is it about you it's so striking about this cover?
Yeah, I gotta go back to just the pulp-like nature of it, and I really like how he portrayed the helmets.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing, man. It's
that
always
was,
round bubble.
Yeah, it looks so cool, and he did a really good job with displaying the background through it, but without making it too realistic, that it pops like a pulp piece. And the spaceship is really, really eye-catching there, and yeah, I mean, it just looks like an awesome classic science fiction tale. It takes you back to being a kid and watching old science fiction stuff with your grandparents. So yeah, it's nostalgic for sure.
No, and absolutely. I think agreeing completely with you. Like I said, the helmets. Wally just had this way of doing it, and I did not include any of my own selections. Had I would have picked pretty much his entire run. I think it was 49 when he was on Will Eisner's The Spirit, when the Spirit goes into space, because that kind of sets the bar for everything that came after with all of his sci-fi work. That is just simply, well, it's amazing they took a street-level hero and just suddenly threw him in space. But other than that, the artwork is just amazing, and it carries on. It's the precursor to what you're celebrating here, and it's fantastic. Anybody in the panel, you got any comments on this one before we switch over to the next one?
No, other than the amazing detail. Like every page I saw of Wally Wood's work was just blew me away. Like how much time and effort and energy did he spend in creating that?
That's
not very much, honestly. He could churn out pages. I mean, you hear stories of Kirby doing 12 pages a week. Wally, I can't find any quotes, but there's a lot of people that speak about it. I did have the chance this year to speak to Steranko about it at the Steranko dinner, and he said he watched Wally one day churn out 4 pages in one day. So, and I don't know if that was pencils and inks or just pencils, but the dude was fast and productive, and he had this level of detail in everything that he put out. But also, he had a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He would reuse, he would cut, he would paste, he would copy. He could do anything he could, but it was all about churning out those pages.
Right.
Just wanted to add, like, what sticks out to me here is the juxtaposition between nature and futurism and technology going on here. Like, look at how beautiful that tree looks. Mm-hmm. It's almost dominating
versus how
the
sleek the spaceship is.
Yeah.
The rugged landscape in the background versus its contours.
Well, it's cool too because it looks like he landed on Earth, but it's it's a space adventure. Yeah.
Right. Well, with Weird Science, you don't. It could be people landing here. That was always the great part about what EC was doing. Mm-hmm. So now I got to hand it to you, Mr. Turner. Of all of all the books, of all the pictures I was sent to go over tonight, this is my absolute favorite, and I have to ask, tell me this is in your own collection.
Not yet. But I
Oh
want it to
man,
be.
this is I love everything about this.
Yeah, it's so cool. Just
This
the
is
creature is just. I mean, the color really pops. Obviously, I mean the color everywhere, but that alien and its design is just very. I don't know. It's pulpy. It's Lovecraftian. The fact that his arms are wings, like, damn, it's just really cool.
yeah, this is like this era of his work, he just seems to be hitting on every cylinder. From the cityscape in the background that is so beautifully contrasted and monotone to the spaceship that's just that spaceship's right out of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers 1930s. It's got that bubble front, that bullet style. It's just everything about it's great, right down to the lettering, man. It's just it's got that evocative tone with like the searchlights going up like it's a World War I air raid with a Zeppelin, but you've got this great alien. It's awesome. I love this piece. This was fantastic, and I think I might have seen this before, but it's been a long time. So thank you so much for sharing it, because that put flying saucers back on my map and went, oh shit, I got to get some copies of that. But
Nice.
fantastic, gentlemen. Any comments?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just always every time you see any like vehicles in Wally Wood's art, it's always just absolutely tremendous. Like great detail. The coloring is always just amazing. His line art, obviously is just superb. I love drawings of vehicles, in general. But yeah, Wally Wood stuff is it's like top tier.
Always, yeah, and we'll get into some of that here in a little bit, I'm sure. So, Jason, what do you got? Oh man,
I want to mention one thing.
Anytime I can promote Fantagraphics stuff, I'm gonna do it, because what is it, like $30?
Yeah, it's pretty affordable. So Fantagraphics is they're reprinting classic EC artists. They're doing volumes devoted to different EC artists. They're hardcover. They're pretty affordable, but the wonderful thing is that it's black and white. So you can see and appreciate the line work and the ink work, because a lot of the reprints you get of EC work, it's colored, and I think the CMYK muddies up the line art. So
yes, it does.
If you like what Brent brought here, go check this out. I think it's, like you said, like $30, but definitely
it's like,
worth it.
They're less than 40. I think it's like 30 for usually most of them are 285 to 325 pages for $30. They're hardbound, excellent sewn binding. I've got at least 12 of them, and they're fantastic. And if you're a comic strip fan, if you watch the episode with Odin Dasko, they also have a complete volume set of the entire Prince Valiant run by Hal Foster. I mean, I can spend all your money for you by just recommending what you need to buy from Fantagraphics. They do fantastic work, and someday here on the show we'll get into some of their early comic stuff, because some of their early comic stuff is really experimental and wild. And while it's not that memorable for its content, it's certainly memorable for what it brought forth as a movement and inspiration. But ever moving on. Mr. Turner, you flummoxed me on this one. What is this from?
You know what? I'm not entirely sure.
Because I thought I knew. I thought it was a Weird Tales issue, but I went through, and granted, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, but it was not any of the issues I thought it was in. So I have no idea where this came from.
Yeah, I stumbled across this today, and I mean, it really popped for me just because it's black and white, but it reminded me of Joe Ball's work, especially with the skull there. I think
there's not nearly enough cross-hatching in
Yeah,
like 4 of those
that's
panels
true.
for it to be balls work. But I can see what you mean, for sure.
Yeah, just the creature on the bottom and then that skull there was really pulled me in, and I need to figure out where it's from and get my hands on it because yeah, this is just a really and I want maybe it's from Erie. He had a book called Erie, so this seems like that fits the
Well,
bill. But
Erie
it's
was a
very eerie
magazine done
feeling.
by Warren Publishing that he contributed to, but a lot of the stuff that he contributed to it were actually reprints of his 50s work. Because what Warren was doing was they were reprinting. They reprinted a ton of Ditko's stuff. They reprinted a bunch of Wood stuff. Ghastly Graham Ingalls had a bunch of his stuff reprinted, and it was their roundabout way to get around the code, which we talked about in the Underground Comics distribution episode. The way they got around it was that you couldn't be called you didn't have to abide by the comics code if you were a magazine. So they made Erie a magazine so that they could get around it. Same reason that Warren went with Mad instead of continuing doing comics, because by being Mad, he didn't have to abide by anything. So, moving on, Mr. Fraction, thank you. Thank you so much, my friend. War comics are not nearly talked about enough for what they bring and what they've brought over the years, whether it's frontline combat, whether it was the GI combat stuff that we talked about with Jason Sandberg on his episode of The Gutter, or whether you're looking forward and it's Michael Golden's work on Nam in the 80s. They don't get nearly enough love. So please, if you would, wax poetic about this stunning cover.
I just like it caught my eye, because mostly because of the line that's being said there. It's like, I mean, imagine you're this kid, you walk into a comic shop, and you see this, and it's like the most motivating thing ever. It's like you're this kid that, just has the whole world in front of you, and you've heard, stories from your father or whatever about, what maybe happened or from his friends. And then, you see this and you're like, I want to go into that world. And it's, he's like, yeah, let's charge, and you're just like super stoked to just check out the first page of this book, because this is like just all action, ready to go, hardcore, like, let's do this.
What is it, gentlemen on the panel? Do any of the other? I mean, am I the only one that really resonates with these war comics? Do you get a different semblance or a sense out of them than other comics, or is that? Am I alone in that?
No. I first started reading GI Joe right from age 13, and I read it nonstop, issue 1 to like issue 200, and I was totally a GI Joe kid. So. Absolutely,
but even GI Joe, and dude, I'm right there with you. That was one of the first Transformers and GI Joe books. Were some of the first books I ever read in the early '80s. Because I mean, they're perfect, right? You got the toy, it's the toy tie-in, the cartoon, the action figure, the book. It's all there.
Yep.
And still today, I just replaced my GI Joe number 22. I found a really nice 8.5 unslabbed copy that because mine is dog-eared and bent and crumpled from riding around in the back of Mom's 1978 Buick Regal for the entire time that I was a kid. It was right there in the back of the seat, and man, you kept on pulling that one out, and Destro and Storm Shadow, and oh, it was awesome. But that's a little bit of a difference. Those are fun war comics. These are war comics. This is pre-code war comics. It's showing you the hell that is combat. Raiden, I got to imagine this resonates a little bit with you.
I mean, yeah, they're clearly looking for their eudaimonia, but the thing that stands out to me is look at all of their eyes. Yeah. I mean, it's, apart from, Robert Downey Jr. and Tropic Thunder down there, like look at the fear in everybody's eyes, especially the guy crouching down.
Yep.
Looks like somebody just opened up the Ark of the Covenant.
Yep. Well, we talked a little bit about this, Jason, when we were talking about Kirby's early career in Pre-Code and how even it was some of his combat comics that came up in the hearings in the Senate with that evil bastard that shall not be named, Wortham. That it was just they were combat vets, most of these guys, so they could really bring across that emotional resonance of not just the adrenaline rush of war, but truly the human cost, and not just the human cost in the sense of lives being lost, but what it takes away from your soul to be in that kind of a situation, and how you're never the same after you go through it. And I can't imagine a better example than this cover. I mean, it truly shows it, as Raiden pointed out with the eyes.
I really think that, like, I mean, Craig and I were both in the military. I was in a better country, but but I think, like, when you look at this, you're right. Look at the eyes, look at the facial expressions. I think a lot of people do see the fear, but I think when he was, this is somebody that probably saw those looks on real faces, and I see, like, the courage in these faces, because it's like, hey, yes, there's fear, but it's also go time, and they're going,
Right.
Well, that's what courage is, isn't it? I mean, it's
exactly.
In the face of fear, you still rise to the occasion. But courage has its foundations in fear. Bravery has its foundations in cowardice, ironically enough. You're overcoming your instinctual urge. It's fight or flight. And your instinctual urge is never to run towards a machine gun. It's never to run towards danger. So that's the overcoming. That's the quality of character.
Well, and also, you don't want to let anyone down. You're part of a team. You're not an individual anymore. And if you don't do your part, you're not protecting the guy beside you. He's protecting the guy beside you. He's protecting the guy beside you, right? Like, you're relying on each other to keep alive.
Yep.
So speaking of reliance on others, your next one, Thunder Agent. Now, this was great. We've got a lot of Thunder Agents we're going to talk about. Do any of you gentlemen want to, talk a little bit about what Thunder Agent was before we kind of admire this wonderful cover?
So I dug out. I have the issues 1 through 5 of Thunder Agents, and when I was told I was coming on this show, I was like, I know I have those books somewhere, but I
like how you were told you were coming on the show instead of invited.
Craig runs the
I appreciate that. Spread that rumor. No,
Absolutely.
I was told I was going on the gutter.
Absolutely.
So Aldous kicked in my door.
Yeah, he did. I saw him, like, he approached the ring camera, and then everything went black, and then I just heard, "You will be on my show," and then I woke up naked.
Whoa.
Wait, what? I don't remember that part. Raiden?
That wasn't him.
He got you naked?
That you're thinking of the Canon strip.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
we're getting to that.
You're right. But no, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out to my mom's and dig through some old stuff, and sure enough, I found them, and I hadn't read them in 30 years, and and so I refreshed my memory as best I could. And Thunder Agents is like if the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were a little more aristocratic and a lot cooler.
Yes, I can't argue with the cooler part.
I mean, and you have the classic, I know we're looking at this one, but you have the classic, bubble head, the underwater agent there. It's the good old Wally Wood bubble head, helmet or whatever. And it's, you're like, oh, cool. This guy is, I also like that he's just undersea agent. That's like the most inconspicuous name ever, right?
Right. It was always I always felt like a little bit of tongue in cheek, but just enough to be fun, because again, they're kids' books in this era. That's their primary market. But yeah, this is a great cover. It's the classic hero rescuing the damsel on the train tracks. You can't get more classic than that. But on this one, I love the attention to detail on the engine. It's just fantastic. from the non-symmetrical right to left sides of the engine, that they're just a little bit different, which anybody that's ever been around a train engine, no, they're not symmetrical. There's different stuff going on each side. To the rivets, that each individual rivet is actually spaced just enough that it looks like it was done by hand and actually riveted. Instead of just a completely symmetrical circle, each one is spaced just enough that you get a little bit of foreshortening and that sense that it was done by hand. It's beautiful work. The detail work on the cap of the steam chamber is fantastic. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And then you, of course, add that in with, that's a classic Wally Wood figure right down to the flared boots. So you gotta love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the lettering is fantastic too. That really pops, and that smoke is, I think, my favorite part. Just how dark that looks,
Well,
while
even
still looking like smoke.
even
The
look in
billowing.
look in the background at the bridge behind the train. Like you didn't have to do all that brickwork, but it's like, duh, I want to put that there. Oh, okay, cool. Like, awesome.
Right, and we've got a lot more Thunder Agent stuff coming in. So the last one, sir, this was sometimes I forget, and actually Jason Sandberg in the pre-show didn't even know these existed. So The World of Wood by Eclipse Comics. Tell me a little bit about this and why you love it so much, other than that fantastic cover with the hot chick.
So I haven't actually read this. I definitely want to get it in my collection. It's just, to me, this is, when you think of non-superhero comics, women riding dinosaurs should be at the forefront of your mind.
I bet you Corey's gonna do something like this one day. This is a Corey comic with the babe. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what comes to my mind is that's a Corey Barton babe right there.
It's,
Pulp.
I mean, come on. What's not to like about this?
Right. So this was a 4-issue miniseries that was done posthumously. It was Wood's work that was thrown together and kind of put into issues, and they had other people involved. It was released from this issue was, this is 3, so it was 86. I think issue 4 came out in 89, but the rest of the series came out in the mid 80s. They're great. They're a lot of fun. They're a little accessible. And when I say a little accessible, you're looking at a price point for like a really high grade copy, unslabbed, probably 15 to 25 an issue. I think they're completely worth it. I own the complete miniseries. They're a lot of fun. I was just great to see it, because this is kind of one of those it's not like some esoteric book that's buried that nobody knows about. We're going to get to one of those later, kind of. But this is one of those things that you can still pull this out of dollar bins, because most people don't know what they have. Because it's an Eclipse comic, and B, it's just off the wall. And there's only 4 of them. So highly recommend anybody that hasn't had a chance to check this out. Check it out. Great pick, man. I love it.
Aldous, if you ever do an episode of The Gutter devoted to Eclipse Comics, I want in. That was my favorite. That was my favorite imprint back in the day. They did so
Eclipse
much good
did a
work.
lot of really fun stuff. I think I've got 2 or 3 things going on that I'd really want to do one on Fantagraphics and some of their books, just because of TheGutter. TheGutter doesn't get nearly enough love and really needs some attention, especially because of what it did. It really, indirectly, it moved Frank Miller's work forward more than Frank Miller's work did, but I'll save that for that episode. But Jason, thanks for speaking up, because now we're going to get into something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is canon. So talk a little bit about what canon was.
So following the Thunder Agents, and we can go into more depth later about the history of Tower Publishing and the Thunder Agents and how they try to give Marvel a run for their money and so forth. But when that didn't work, Wally Wood created this character who was an American agent who was captured by the communists and brainwashed, and basically when he was picked back up by the CIA, they said, let's just finish his brainwashing and turn him into the perfect agent, right? So Cannon was an American kind of James Bond, but he had no empathy. And Wally would put out 2 issues of like it was like a solo anthology comic called Heroes. I think it was Heroes Illustrated, but basically he put out 2 issues as a proof of concept, and then he used that to get Cannon to become an ongoing strip in U.S. Army's newspaper Overseas Weekly. So this ran in the early 70s, and it was basically appearing in the newspapers that were provided to servicemen overseas, and so it was very based, and there was it was basically a lot of commie smashing, a lot of little Cannon going on missions, and then women try to seduce him, and he turns the tables on them, and so forth, and just a lot of and the artwork was just beautiful, and because it was a weekly strip, so he could really lavish it with attention, and just absolutely beautiful work. So there's Fantagraphics did publish a collection of Cannon that's readily available. And I think it's special because this was a very widely circulated newspaper, and it was basically a rated R newspaper strip directed to servicemen. And Wally Wood had a lot of creative freedom, and it ran for several years. And I think he did some of his best black and white work in this era.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you at all on that. Panel 2 of the page that I have up right now, that is one of the most beautiful drawings I've ever seen of a P-38. That is just it's absolutely, and technically the technical accuracy with the double cowling underneath the engines is fantastic. He could have just scrimped and just done a single intake. He didn't. He split the intake, like that was accurate. The only one minor nitpick is he doesn't have all the guns evident in their recessed fuselage holes on the front, but of the nose cone. But we'll let that slide for now. But the overall use of shading, the use of light sourcing, very similar. He was a student of Hal Foster, so you are seeing a lot of Foster here. On all of the faces, though, and this is what makes Wood so epic. A lot of artists from this time, they gravitated to one of 2 men. Either you were kind of copying Hal Foster or you were copying Alex Raymond. What we have here is a single panel or single page of this comic strip that was in a newspaper, and he's dedicating half to one and half the other. The top half is nothing but an ode to Hal Foster. The bottom is nothing but an ode to Alex Raymond. From the faces to the shading to the line work, it's absolutely masterful work, and it supersedes both of the men. And I in my opinion, it supersedes both of those greats. And I don't think it gets any better than either one of them when it comes to comic strips. But somehow Wood was able to do it, and it's just absolutely fantastic. And Cannon also was because it was in military newspapers, it was all around the world. And so, as I mentioned in the Underground Comics episode, you will find Cannon collections that are in German, that are in Italian, that are in Japanese, that are in Korean. They are all over, and you can readily buy them on eBay. They're like usually 20 to 30 pages, because it was so popular on the Army bases that there was a resonance. People locally, kids, were trying to get their hands on this because A, it's a lot of action. B, there's naked chicks.
Lots of them.
And lots of them. As we had to black out here on this one particular page and it's really hard to find a page of Cannon that doesn't have nudity, violence, or sex on it.
So, it's not just the female figure. It's the female figure as depicted by Wally Wood.
Exactly.
And his work is beautiful, right? Now, one thing I want to mention is that we talked about the 22 or 24 panels that always work. When you look at Cannon, because it was a newspaper strip that was weekly, he actually deployed a lot of the tricks and the techniques that he outlined in the 22 panels that always work, because he had to catch people up on what had happened like kind of previously, and he had to keep the plot going with just a finite number of panels, unlike a 22-page comic book. So if you look at the 22 panels of his work and you read some canon, you'll see it used to good effect.
For sure. No, that's an excellent point. And I think we can carry that over into your next example as well, which is really, I mean, it's a massive issue if you're a Captain America fan, which is Captain America 127.
So what's unique about this is that I brought a case where Wally Wood is inking, right? Now we've looked at his pencils and inking his own pencils, but what I thought was unique about this is that this is era of Captain America where Gene Colan was penciling. And Gene Colan is notoriously difficult to ink because he has this very lyrical feathered pencil style, right? And
very
a lot
smooth,
of
yep.
Exactly, and a lot of inkers trip up. They trip up and they can't find the middle ground. They can't find the middle values in the Gene Colan artwork. But you can, as you look at this, Gene Colan never looked so good, and you can still tell that it's Gene Colan, but it's got that Wally Wood edge. Wally Wood doesn't overpower him, but it just looks beautiful. And I think it's if you want to judge an inker, look at how they inked over Gene Colan, and that will tell you what caliber of an inker they were.
Oh, for
and then
sure.
I'm going to also say it's that 1970, it's basically Silver Age Captain America. From the Jack Kirby Tales of Suspense all the way up through the Mike Zeck work with J.M.D. Mateus. That is, from start to finish, a great series. So 1970s Cap, Bronze Age Cap, Silver Age Cap, I think it's great from start to finish. So you've got so many legendary artists working on that run. Sal Buscema, John Byrne, Jack Kirby himself, Gene Colan, Jim Steranko. It's a treasure trove, and I don't think it gets the love it deserves. But again, looking at like the helmet there, looking at some of the lighting effects and some of the tech in the background, you can tell it's Wally Wood.
Yep. No, this is a great. I love Fury in these panels. This is great. Color choice I disagree with though. I don't like the green. He should be in the black with the yellow. That's just. But yeah, this is just great stuff. Again, you get the great domed helmets.
And again, these are situations in these panels here. You've got that Gene Colan blur, that movement, that fluidity, and he's able to. So we looked at the other work by Wally Wood, and it's very precise, very technical. He's able to do that wispy motion blur effect that Gene Colan mastered, and I think that shows that he could do it all.
Absolutely, and greetings to all of those that have arrived. We've got Belmont Press and Arrogant Ape have shown up in the chat, along with a couple others. Great to see you, gentlemen. And then, so your last one here was some Thunder Agent. You want to talk about why this page in particular?
Yeah, so one of the subplots to this episode is that me and the other gentleman here are starting a show called the Friday Night. So we were talking about what Wally Wood we were going to bring here, and Kris stole my thunder, as it were. He said, "I'm doing new Thunder Agents," and I'm like, "Okay, all right, okay, you got first dibs on Thunder Agents." But then I said, "There's one page of Thunder Agents that I've gotta bring because." The storytelling here and the using the panels as different chambers in this underground bunker, it's and the way it flows. I mean, this is better than what Frank Quitely did on All-Star Superman here. And the other thing is that think about the audience. These comics from these Thunder Agents, they're geared towards teenagers and young kids and so forth. What boy doesn't think about having a fort? Man, let's build a fort, right? And this is the bunker of the enemy agents, the enemy agency called Spider. But regardless, I mean, you can't not look at this page and be like, oh, that is so cool. That is so cool. So just loved it as a good example of layout and storytelling and using the page differently. I think it's just amazing.
Fantastic. So you mentioned your new show, which is what we let off with, which is why all you fine gentlemen are down here in the gutter this evening. what's Friday nights all about? What's the goal? What's the plan?
It's this guy right here, Craig. Craig's got the most history in this this arena, and he's gonna explain his vision, because he's the one who kind of assembled us.
No pressure. Yeah. No. So basically, I've been looking to do a show for a little while. I've got really bad internet, so I can't host something by myself. As you know, it's always good to have a co-host, so you're not sitting there with frozen face. So I've reached out over the past year or so, just looking for people to co-host with, and it's actually a lot more difficult than it is to find people you can jive with. So we were looking at doing a show that's an hour-long wrap-up, kind of more like a late-night talk show, where the biggest topics that occurred that week, we do a nice segue into all those big topics, bring in a guest, throw it all into 1 hour consistently every Friday night at the exact same time. People can go there, they can find out what happened, get all our takes, find out the newest project, and then bam, we're out of there. So you're not watching a stream for 4 or 5 hours. And that's our goal. The four of us, we've been working on this for 2 months, getting to know each other, and like I said, it's coming soon.
Nice. What's the plan for the meat and potatoes of it? What are you going to be talking about? Is it an interview show, or is it a topic-oriented show? Just a general discussion show?
Like I said, basically we're looking at the three main topics, the three biggest things that happened that week, and we'll cover those.
So just those topics, nothing else.
I think like as we've kind of been practicing and learning the cadence of the show, I think we have realized that yes, those topics, but those topics usually branch out into other topics, and I mean, really, we just want to be like a little structured, but still off the cuff as far as like how being on the show together is going to be.
Wait, you can practice something before you do it?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Well,
That's what happens when you have two military vets on the panel.
Yeah.
We're like, no.
And
one of the other things,
set of orders. This is what
So
we will do.
that does bring up the next obvious point. If you're going to be talking about just the three biggest topics of that week, to keep it engaging for the audience, how do you make sure that you all don't agree? Because that's not engaging content, right? If you're all just like, yeah, we're all right, moving on.
I think we have realized that I mean, we have differing opinions on a lot of things. Like for instance, BA is a big Zack Snyder fan.
I still hold Watchmen was an excellent adaptation. So
yes,
I'm with you there,
agree.
man. The Superman stuff, I got to disagree with you on that, but.
See, I just threw you into the fire there.
That's okay. I'm always a great example for that. Every stream, they're like, oh,
No, I agree.
Inspires you, and well, there we go.
I'm a Watchmen simp, so I actually liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the other things too is you have a wild card with our guests, right? We're gonna have a different guest every week, and who knows what they'll agree with and what they won't. But on top of those three main things that we're going to talk about, we're also going to be talking about what that person is doing. So if that guest has a project, we're going to be shilling that project, making sure that everyone gets to see it. So there's also a promotional aspect of it, making sure that we can get other indie creators recognized and get their projects out there, and then they get involved in the topics, and again, that can veer off into subtopics or grow the conversation beyond just us four.
Right. Now, KSS brings up an excellent point. So will you guys be covering topics and things that are important to most people, like the Barbie movie?
so what I would say is that we're gonna be focused on we're gonna get together on, say, Thursdays, figure out what the top three news items were for the week, kind of centered in not necessarily the political world, but culturally and comic books and so forth. And then we're gonna have we are not going to be intentionally trying to rage bait people. We are going to have fun laughing at these people. And we are going to have the zip and the banter of, say, like, we're going to try and be like 4 Dennis Millers on Weekend Update. That's what we're going to try and do. So we're going to do our damn best to bring you that. So no matter what kind of shit happens during the week, on Friday nights, with the Friday nights, you're gonna get our take on the big 3 items, but you are not going to get any more madder than you were on Thursday night. You're going to go into the weekend with a smile and a chuckle, and you're going to meet some interesting people.
Nice. Now, I'm just going to offer a suggestion here, as somebody that's been doing a Saturday show that has 4 co-hosts for quite a while. You can do 3 Millers, but you need to have a norm. You need to have the guy that just comes out of left field and goes,
Brent just volunteered.
Yeah, Frank Stallone. You know, that's important. So, gentlemen, we're going to get ready to close it out here. Starting up at the top with Mr. Turner, if I may put you on the hot seat. You've got a book out currently. You want to give your quick spiel and say any last words?
Yeah, so I definitely recommend everyone go check out. Sorry, that was my dog making a weird noise. Recommend everyone check out Vigilante's Creed on Indiegogo and Fund My Comic. If you're looking for some novels as well as a mini comic based around a gargoyle. And yeah, I think tonight's topic was, definitely a great one. Not just art wise, but also on a personal level, and talking about the history of these artists is really important to find relatability and also provide passion for people. And yeah, I'm glad that you're doing this, and I'm really excited for our team and our show that starts next week. So I hope everyone comes and checks us out, and I hope you show up as a guest one of these
man,
days.
I'm looking forward to the invite. Corey Barton asks, what's the link to the YouTube channel? Is it going to be a floating show, or is it isolated to one channel?
Sort of between me and Jason right now. We're still trying to narrow down if we're going to simulcast or if we're going to pick one. So almost there.
Fight.
Once we
Fight.
dial once
2
we-
men enter, 1 man leaves.
Once we dial it in, we'll be blasting it everywhere. And I'm working on the trailer. So follow us all on Twitter. You'll start to see clips of the trailer coming out as I finish the trailer. It should be a lot of fun, and it should help set the tone.
Gotcha. Arrogant Ape says he digs this format. Like, I don't, man. I don't like having this many people. I feel it's like completely impersonal, and we're drifting on topics, and there's no organization. But that's me being a ones and zeros guy. So, which is weird because we're talking about art. But in any case, Raiden, I'm gonna put you on the hot seat, man. You've got Listen coming up, which is your ash can for your next Noirlim novel. You want to talk a little bit about that, and any last thoughts on? Before we close out here?
Yeah, I don't really have anything going on. I'm launching a book tomorrow. Listen on Fund My Comic. It's going to be an ash can that introduces Noirlim 2. It's going to be $7, so you guys got to all get in there. Tried to, make something a little bit more affordable since it's like a little more slow story. But yeah, I'd encourage everybody to tune in to Desolate Souls tomorrow night. We're going to launch it on there, and yeah, get a little piece of my writing and see what it's all about.
Nice.
Yeah. Kris, last words, thoughts?
I am the glorious and notorious Kris Faction. Follow me on Twitter. I retweet campaigns and sometimes other stuff. I am working on a book. These guys know about it. They've seen some pages. If you follow me on Twitter, you can see a few of the pages. But I'm still a ways out, so just keep following.
Very good. And Mad Ruth, Soltac,
Yep.
still in demand.
Still working on it. I will be revamping my campaign to reflect the next book, Arise Issue 4. So it's going to be completely redone. But I'm still trying to make that 10K. I'm so focused on trying to hit that number that I don't want to quit. But more so, like you were saying, just with the 4 of us, BA, Kris, myself, and Jason, follow us all on Twitter. We'll follow you back. Subscribe to YouTube. Same thing. We'll subscribe back to your YouTube. And all the details for everything we're doing, we constantly post updates.
Awesome. And we've got Felix Haas in the chat. He should be dropping everybody's YouTube channels, everybody's Twitters. If you need to know them, we can drop those in chat real quick. Before we get to Jason's last words, I did want to highlight a chat comment from KSS, and happy birthday again, by the way, for my friend. He asks, Frank Hampson art review show when? So originally, the 4th or 5th episode was going to be dedicated to Frank Hampson. However, the individual that I want on with me is currently he's dealing with a little bit of life stuff, so he's had to take a step away and hasn't been able to. But for those of you that don't know, Frank Hampson was the primary artist and British illustrator that did Dan Dare. And Dan Dare, it was an Eagle. Eagle was not a comic; it was actually almost like a newspaper. It's fundamentally important when you start talking about where we are at today, because without Dan Dare, you do not have 2000 AD. And without 2000 AD, you don't have any of the talent that came out of there, the primary talent being, of course, Alan Moore. So the lineage of what Dan Dare inspired and what Hampson's art carried forward for the next half century is truly an epic level conversation, and that needs to be done with an immense amount of care. And there's only one individual, in my opinion, that can really carry that forward with me, and he's currently really tied up. So once he's freed, that will be happening. I guarantee you, as the probably, man, I'd put my Dan Dare Eagle collection up against pretty much anybody in the States. I own 47 copies of Eagle. So I probably own more than anybody outside of Europe. I could be proven wrong, and I would love to be proved wrong, because it'd be fantastic to know somebody else over here loves it as much as I do. But great to hear, man. Good to, yes, and it is the aardvark. I'm sure that's probably no surprise to anybody that listens to us regularly. But Jason, last thoughts, comments, words, and Jupiter is still available.
Yep, Jupiter's in demand. Went from launch to completion of fulfillment in 110 days. So in that regard, I beat Hojo. But otherwise, go check it out. It's on Indiegogo. It's on Found My Comic. We're approaching $8,700, and so please go check it out. 40 pages full color for $13. Superheroic, surrealism, and satire all in one place. Please go check it out.
Well, the worst part about the Hojo Slam is he's on vacation right now and isn't listening
I'll
to
help
this.
Hojo.
He'll hear about it, I'm sure.
So he doesn't. Nobody needs to help Hojo put the mythicals down. He's on vacation. He can shill his own stuff. He's
right.
taking a break. That's on him.
Yeah.
But on that note, ladies, gentlemen, simians in the chat, I'm looking at you, Abe. Thank you so much for joining us this evening in the gutter.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
This is blood for blood and by the gallons. This is the old days, man, the bad days, the all or nothing days. They're back. There's no choices left.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.